From ocean-crossing ships to atmosphere-piercing rockets, why does humanity never stop exploring? And what is the next bold step in that journey? The answer lies deep within our instincts. Just as the waves ceaselessly crash upon the shore, humanity possesses a relentless urge to reach further, to see what lies beyond the horizon. 5 centuries ago, the creaking wooden ships of Columbus or Magellan set sail, not just to redraw the world map, but to sow the seeds of new worlds. They didn't just carry compasses and provisions. They carried an entire ecosystem, a miniature society, and most importantly, they carried the ability to create the next generations on new lands. A flag planted on a foreign shore means nothing if there's no one there to defend it, to build homes, to farm the land, and to bear children, the first citizens of that land. Establishing a new colony, whether in the Americas or on another planet, has always demanded one irreplaceable prerequisite: the ability to reproduce and self-sustain. Without the ability to procreate, we are merely temporary visitors. But with it, we become permanent settlers. And that brings us to today's core question, a question that transcends the realm of rocket engineering or robotics. It is a biological question on a cosmic scale. Can humans reproduce in space? This is not just a scientific curiosity. It is the final barrier, the fateful test that will determine whether our future is confined to this blue planet or if it will reach for the stars. Can we build families on the moon, raise the first generation on Mars, and begin a new chapter of human history among the celestial bodies? In this video, we will embark on a journey through space and time to find the answer. We will look to the past, exploring the secret experiments and the first attempts to understand life in a weightless environment. We will analyze the harsh challenges of the present, from deadly cosmic radiation to the strange effects of microgravity on the human body. And finally, we will look towards an ambitious future, where lunar bases, Martian cities, and even interstellar generation ships are no longer science fiction. Let's begin our journey to explore humanity's final frontier. Before humans set foot on the moon, we sent other creatures first. What were the first lessons these animal astronauts taught us about life in space? The answer lies not just in dry data charts, but hidden within tragic and inspiring stories of the silent pioneers of the cosmos. Our journey to understand reproduction beyond Earth didn't begin with humans, but with the creatures that sacrificed to pave the way. From the very dawn of the space age, both the United States and the Soviet Union understood a fundamental truth. Before sending their best astronauts, they had to be certain that a living organism could withstand the harsh conditions out there. And so, an army of animal astronauts was recruited. We often remember Laika, the mixed-breed dog launched into orbit aboard Sputnik 2 in 1957. It was a suicide mission, a one-way ticket to prove that a complex organism could survive launch and exist in microgravity. Laika's death sparked worldwide controversy, but it also provided invaluable, first-of-its-kind biological data. On the other side of the Atlantic, the United States had Ham the chimp. In 1961, Ham undertook a suborbital flight, performing simple tasks to demonstrate that cognitive functions were not severely impaired in space. Ham's safe return was a resounding victory, directly paving the way for Alan Shepard's historic flight. But survival was only the first step. The bigger, more profound question remained. Can life continue? Can it regenerate itself in the cold, empty void of space? This is where the real reproduction experiments began. The first organisms entrusted with this task were not mammals, but much humbler candidates, fruit flies. In 1947, long before Sputnik, a US V-2 rocket carried fruit flies to an altitude of over 100 kilometers. They returned to Earth safely, and more importantly, they were still able to reproduce normally. This was the first proof that high-altitude radiation did not necessarily cause sterilization. Then came more complex species. The Russians sent geckos, newts, and fish into space. In one famous experiment, guppies were taken aboard the Salyut 5 space station. Amazingly, they adapted and successfully reproduced in microgravity. The baby fish born in space appeared completely normal. This proved that, at least for some cold-blooded animals, the process of fertilization and embryonic development could occur without gravity. But mammals were a different story entirely. Our physiology is far more complex, and the bond between mother and fetus is much more sensitive to environmental changes. This was the wall that Soviet scientists tried to break through in a series of bold experiments on the Cosmos biosatellites. One of the most famous experiments, known as Cosmos 1129 in 1979, attempted to answer a basic question: would rats mate in space? They sent 2 male and 5 female rats into orbit for nearly 19 days. The result? A troubling silence. Not a single female became pregnant. Later analysis suggested that the microgravity environment and the stress of the flight seemed to have completely suppressed their mating behavior. Gravity, it turned out, is not just the force that keeps us on the ground. It might be a subtle environmental cue necessary to trigger complex reproductive behaviors. All right, if they couldn't mate, what would happen if we sent already pregnant rats into space? This was an even more critical question, as it related directly to fetal development. Many experiments were conducted, and the results were truly alarming. Although some mother rats successfully gave birth after returning to Earth, the rate of mortality and complications was significantly higher. The pups born to spacefaring mothers were often underweight, had weaker immune systems, and showed developmental delays in their vestibular systems, the part of the inner ear that helps us balance. They struggled to orient themselves in a normal gravity environment. It seemed the absence of gravity during a critical developmental phase had scrambled their innate blueprint. And then there were the rumors, the whispers in the corridors of the Cold War. It was said that not all experiments were made public. With the intense competition between the two superpowers, failures were often concealed. There were rumors that the Soviets had attempted to achieve a complete reproductive cycle in rats in space, from mating to gestation to birth, but that the results were too catastrophic to publish. Some unofficial sources claimed that none of the pups survived, or that they were born with severe deformities. Whether true or not, these rumors reflect a reality. Mammalian reproduction in space is an incredibly difficult challenge. So, after all the sacrifices of these animal astronauts, what did we learn? They taught us 3 harsh lessons. First, microgravity disrupts complex social and reproductive behaviors. Second, it dangerously interferes with the development of the embryo and fetus, especially the nervous and skeletal systems. And third, the constant threat of cosmic radiation can damage DNA, leading to infertility or birth defects. These silent pioneers, from the tiny fruit fly to the intelligent chimpanzee, drew the first map of the biological perils beyond Earth. They didn't give us the final answer, but they pointed us to the right questions, the enormous hurdles we must overcome if we ever want to turn the dream of a multi-planetary species into a reality. Why are billionaires and leading space agencies investing billions of dollars in conquering Mars? Is it a mere impulse or a necessity for survival behind this dream? The answer, much like the universe itself, is not simple. It is a symphony of ambition, curiosity, and above all, an ultimate mandate written in the language of survival. This dream is driven not just by the desire to explore, but by a profound realization that Earth, the cradle of humanity, will not be our eternal home. Consider our planet's history. It is shaped by cataclysmic events. 66 million years ago, an asteroid wiped out the dinosaurs, the rulers of Earth for over 150 million years. That was not the first mass extinction event, and it certainly will not be the last. The universe is a chaotic place, and we are living on a beautiful but incredibly fragile biological shipship, flying through a cosmic shooting gallery. It is only a matter of time before another external threat comes knocking. But perhaps the greatest danger doesn't come from the stars, but from ourselves. Climate change is rewriting the world map. Global pandemics can erupt at any moment, and the specter of nuclear war, once unleashed, could plunge our green planet into a cold, eternal winter. Human history is a testament to both our extraordinary creativity and our terrifying potential for self-destruction. To place all our hopes, all our heritage, all our future in a single basket, a single planet, is not a wise strategy. It is a reckless gamble with our own existence. This is where the concept of a backup for humanity comes into play. This is not science fiction, but a species preservation strategy on an interplanetary scale. A self-sustaining colony on Mars, on the Moon, or in an orbital space station would act as a backup for civilization. If the unimaginable happens on Earth, the story of humanity does not end. The torch of consciousness, of science, and of art will continue to be lit elsewhere. The great astronomer Carl Sagan once said, "The long-term future of the human race is in space. That is where we belong." Becoming a multi-planetary species is not a luxury. It is an insurance policy for our survival. However, leaving Earth is not just a defensive act. It is also the door to a new era of prosperity and discovery. Space is an infinite treasure trove. Asteroids are filled with precious metals and rare elements, with a potential value in the quadrillions of dollars, enough to completely reshape the global economy. Harvesting solar energy in space, unhindered by clouds and atmosphere, could provide clean, virtually limitless power for Earth. Scientifically, building telescopes on the Moon or in deep space will allow us to look back to the birth of the universe, search for signs of extraterrestrial life, and perhaps answer the most fundamental question: are we alone? It is this grand vision that has spurred a new generation of explorers. Elon Musk with SpaceX doesn't just talk about going to Mars, he talks about building a city of 1 million people there, making humanity a truly multi-planetary species. Jeff Bezos, with Blue Origin, envisions a future where millions of people live and work in space, moving heavy industry off Earth so our planet can become a vast nature preserve. National space agencies like NASA in the US and CNSA in China are also racing to establish a permanent presence on the Moon, seeing it as a necessary stepping stone for further journeys to the Red Planet. They are not dreamers. They are the architects laying the first bricks of our future. They understand that an outpost on Mars with a few rotating scientists is not a backup. A base on the Moon just for resource extraction is not a new civilization. All these grand plans, all these billion-dollar investments converge on a single crucial point, an indispensable condition to turn the dream into reality. That condition is reproduction. A community is only truly self-sustaining when it can create the next generation. A child born on Mars would be the ultimate declaration that we have succeeded. It turns an expedition into a settlement. It turns a base into a home. Therefore, solving the biological challenges of conception, pregnancy, and childbirth in the space environment is not a secondary detail. It is the next logical step, the core problem to be solved. If we are serious about becoming a multi-planetary species, then we must be serious about learning how to create multi-planetary people. That is the ultimate mandate. Before venturing to the distant Mars, the Moon is the ideal testing ground. What challenges and opportunities would a lunar settlement face for the first family off Earth? The answer will not only shape the future of the Artemis program, but also determine if humanity can truly become a multi-planetary species. Because Mars is a risky one-way trip, while the Moon, just a 3-day journey away, is like a safe training ground in our own backyard. It's a place where we can make mistakes, learn, and most importantly, return. So, how truly harsh is the environment on our cosmic neighbor? First, and the greatest enemy, is radiation. Without a thick atmosphere or a global magnetic field for protection, the lunar surface is constantly bombarded by cosmic rays and solar storms. An unprotected astronaut would receive a lethal dose of radiation in a short time. For a developing fetus, which is extremely sensitive to DNA damage, this risk is magnified exponentially. Second is the lunar dust, also known as regolith. This is not the soft, fine dust you find at home. It consists of razor-sharp, electrostatically charged rock particles that can hover in the low-gravity environment. Inhaling this dust can cause lung diseases similar to silicosis, and it can also damage delicate machinery. Finally, there's the issue of gravity. The Moon's gravity is only 1/6 that of Earth's. We know that microgravity on the International Space Station causes severe muscle atrophy and bone density loss. But the long-term effects of living in a 1/6 gravity environment on an adult body, and especially on a fetus forming its skeletal and muscular systems, remain a massive unknown. However, each of these challenges comes with incredible solutions and opportunities. The Moon's greatest advantage is its proximity. A medical emergency during pregnancy or childbirth? A rescue ship could arrive within days, not months as with Mars. Need a specialized medical device or an emergency supply? Transportation from Earth is relatively fast and feasible. This proximity transforms the Moon from a deadly peril into a controlled laboratory. To deal with radiation and micrometeoroids, the answer lies not on the surface, but underground. The Moon has ancient lava tubes, enormous tunnels formed by flowing magma billions of years ago. These natural caves can be kilometers long and hundreds of meters wide, large enough to house an entire city. The tens of meters of rock and regolith above would serve as a natural and effective radiation shield, protecting inhabitants from the harshness of space. And the 1/6 gravity problem itself opens up a unique scientific opportunity. The Moon is the only place where we can study the development of mammals and eventually humans in a long-term, low-gravity environment. How would a child born and raised on the Moon develop? Would their bones grow longer but weaker? How would the vestibular system in the ear, which helps us balance, adapt? Answering these questions is crucial before we venture to a more distant place like Mars. Let's imagine the daily life of the first family in the Artemis base. They would live in a module built inside a lava tube, illuminated by an LED system that simulates Earth's day-night cycle. Looking through windows made of super-durable transparent material, they would see the blue Earth hanging in the black sky, a constant reminder of home. The first child born there, a true Lunan, would grow up in a completely different world. Their playground would be the vast corridors of the base, where they could jump 6 times higher than on Earth. Their physics lessons wouldn't be abstract theories, but the reality they experience every day. That child would be a living symbol, proof that humanity is no longer bound to its terrestrial cradle. The birth of that baby would be an event watched by the entire world, a moment even more significant than Neil Armstrong's first step. It would mark our transition from space explorers to space settlers. Therefore, the Moon is not the final destination, but the crucible. It is where we will learn to build, to survive, and most importantly, to create a new generation in the cosmos. The lessons learned from the first family on the Moon will be the foundation upon which we write the next, more audacious chapter, building a brand new society on Mars. When we set foot on Mars, we won't just be building habitats, we'll be building an entire society. How will the reproduction and upbringing of the first generation of Martians shape this new civilization? The answer lies not in rocket technology or construction techniques, but in the very essence of being human. It touches upon the most profound questions about our existence, adaptation, and the future of our species. Unlike the Moon, which is merely a stopover a few light seconds from Earth, Mars is a completely different world. A journey of 6 to 9 months and a communication delay of up to 20 minutes. There is no quick way back. There is no immediate rescue. On the red planet, self-reliance isn't an option. It's the only law. Mars's thin atmosphere offers almost no protection from cosmic radiation. Its gravity, only 1/3 of Earth's, will reshape every biological aspect. And global dust storms can last for weeks, plunging everything into darkness and isolation. In this harsh context, the birth of a child is more than just a family's joy. It is the confirmation that humanity can take root in another world. But for that root to be strong enough, we need more than one family. We need a population. Conservation biologists have a concept called the minimum viable population, the smallest number of individuals required for a species to survive in the wild without suffering from inbreeding depression. This number is often estimated to be around 500 breeding individuals. For a completely isolated colony on Mars, this number might need to be even larger. This poses a colossal logistical and ethical problem. How do we select the first few hundred people? They must not only be the best scientists and engineers, but also possess a diverse gene pool and an incredibly resilient psyche. Each person will be a precious link in the genetic chain of humanity on Mars, and this leads to unprecedented psychological and social challenges. Imagine a community where everyone knows each other, living and working in confined spaces. Privacy is almost non-existent. Every relationship, every conflict is amplified. In such an environment, the birth of the first baby will be a momentous event, watched by the entire community. The pressure on the parents would be unimaginable. The child's health is not just their responsibility, but a concern for the entire planet. Every developmental milestone, from the first cry to the first step, will be recorded, analyzed, and become part of humanity's legacy. A common cold on Earth could become a medical crisis on Mars. The initial Martian society might have to enforce strict rules on relationships and reproduction to ensure genetic diversity and optimize survival chances. Will love and personal choice still have a place in such a cold equation of survival? These are questions we, as a species, must confront. But perhaps the most profound change will lie within the bodies of the children born there. Growing up in an environment with only 1/3 gravity, their bodies will develop in a completely different way. Scientists predict that Martians will be taller than Earthlings, as their spines won't be as compressed. However, their bone density and muscle mass will be significantly lower. Their hearts won't need to pump as hard as ours, leading to a weaker cardiovascular system. And there is a startling but logical consequence. A person born and raised on Mars may never be able to return to Earth. Their body, fine-tuned for a low-gravity environment, would be unable to withstand the pull of their home planet. They would be permanently bound to the red planet. They would be true Martians, in the most literal sense. This physiological divergence, combined with spatial and temporal isolation, will inevitably lead to the birth of a completely new culture and identity. They will not look up at the sky and see Earth as home, but as a faint blue dot, the homeland of their ancestors. Their history will not begin in Mesopotamia or Egypt, but in Alpha Dome and the Eagle Lander. Their heroes will be the first astronauts, the engineers who built their habitats. Their language might develop new slang, new terms to describe their unique world. And as the generational gap widens, will they still feel human in the way we define it, or will they see themselves as something new, the next evolutionary branch? Are we witnessing the beginning of Homo Martis, the Martian human? This question is no longer science fiction. It is a tangible possibility, a necessary consequence of the journey we are embarking on. Building a society on Mars is not just about conquering a new world. It is a grand experiment on human nature itself and the infinite adaptability of life. If microgravity is one of the biggest hurdles, why don't we just bring gravity with us? How is the science fiction of spinning spaceships about to become reality? The answer, surprisingly, lies in a physics principle you likely experimented with as a child. Imagine tying a ball to a string and spinning it around. You feel a force pulling the string taut. That's centripetal force. Simultaneously, the ball seems to be flung outward. This is inertia, but we commonly call it centrifugal force. Now replace the ball with an astronaut, the string with the structure of a space station, and spin the entire structure. The floor would constantly push against the astronaut's feet to keep them moving in a circle, and their brain would interpret that constant push as being identical to gravity. By adjusting the size of the ring and the speed of rotation, we could create a force that precisely simulates 1g, Earth's gravity. This is not a new idea. It's older than the space program itself. As early as 1903, one of the founding fathers of astronautics, Russian scientist Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, sketched out rotating structures to combat the effects of weightlessness. But the idea truly blossomed during the golden age of science fiction and the ambitious space plans of the 20th century. In the 1950s, Wernher von Braun, the chief architect of the Saturn V rocket that took humans to the moon, envisioned a massive wheel-shaped space station. However, the most iconic design has to be the Stanford Torus, a 1975 NASA research project. This wasn't just a space station, it was a world. A giant torus, or donut shape, nearly 1.8 kilometers in diameter, would rotate once per minute to create a perfect 1 g of gravity on its outer rim. Inside would be an artificial valley with soil, rivers, trees, and homes for 10,000 residents. It was a bold vision of an Earth-like oasis among the stars, where families could live, work, and raise children as they normally would. So why haven't we built it yet? For decades, these dreams were shelved due to colossal costs and unimaginable engineering challenges. But today, with the rise of private space companies and new material technologies, the idea is experiencing a powerful revival. Companies like VAST and Orbital Assembly Corporation are actively developing plans for the first commercial space stations with artificial gravity modules. Instead of building a giant torus from the start, the modern approach is more practical. Begin with smaller modules. Imagine the current International Space Station, but with an added cylindrical module. This module would spin independently, creating a zone with gravity, perhaps 0.38 g to simulate Mars, or 1 g for astronauts to sleep, exercise, and most importantly, conduct long-term biological experiments in a familiar environment. However, bringing gravity along is not simple. The biggest challenge is size. To create comfortable gravity without spinning dizzyingly fast, the structure's radius must be very large. If you were in a small, fast-spinning centrifuge, your body would experience a strange phenomenon called the Coriolis effect. Your head, being closer to the center of rotation, would move slower than your feet. As you moved, your inner ear would receive conflicting signals, causing severe dizziness and nausea. This is why designs like the Stanford Torus are so massive, to minimize the Coriolis effect to an unnoticeable level. Building such a large structure in space requires breakthroughs in robotic self-assembly and ultra-strong, lightweight materials. Despite these obstacles, artificial gravity is still considered the silver bullet for long-duration space travel and settlement. It solves nearly every physiological problem we've discussed. Bones would no longer lose density, muscles wouldn't atrophy, and the cardiovascular system would function normally. Most importantly, it removes the biggest and most frightening unknown from the equation of off-world reproduction. In a 1 g environment, the process of fertilization, embryonic development, and the formation of a child's skeleton and nervous system would likely proceed in the way evolution intended. It transforms a foreign, hostile environment into a place where the human body can feel at home. Creating artificial gravity isn't just an engineering convenience, it's a fundamental biological requirement. It is the bridge between merely surviving in space and truly living and thriving there, ensuring that the next generation of humanity, whether born in Earth's orbit or on the way to Mars, will still have a solid foundation beneath their feet. To reach another star system, humans might have to live for multiple generations on a spaceship. How would a generation ship work, and what biological and social problems does it pose? The answer to this question lies not merely in technical blueprints, but at the very limits of human biology, society, and psychology. This is one of the most audacious ideas science has ever conceived. A miniature world, a high-tech Noah's Ark, carrying not just people, but an entire civilization across the abyss between stars. A generation ship is not a means of transport. It is a destination in itself. It is home, a homeland for generations who will never know Earth and will never see the destination planet. They are the voyagers, the living bridges connecting the past and the future. Imagine a colossal structure, possibly tens, even hundreds of kilometers long, rotating to create artificial gravity. Inside are not cramped corridors, but an entire ecosystem. Fields, rivers, cities, all enclosed within a massive protective shell. This is the basic concept of a generation ship. But to turn this concept into reality, we must solve seemingly insurmountable problems. First and foremost is survival. On Earth, we live in an open ecosystem, receiving energy from the sun and resources from the planet. On a generation ship, everything must be perfectly self-contained. Every drop of water you drink, every breath you take, must be recycled with nearly 100% efficiency. Urine would be filtered into drinking water. Solid waste would become fertilizer for crops. Exhaled carbon dioxide would be photosynthesized into oxygen by algae and plants. The entire ship must function as a single living organism, a perfect miniature Earth. Any small flaw in this cycle, an unwanted bacterium, an irreparable system failure, could accumulate over generations and lead to the collapse of the entire ecosystem. But the greatest challenge lies not in the machinery, but in our own genes. How many people do you need to start a new world? 2, like Adam and Eve? The answer is a much, much larger number. This is the problem of the minimum viable population. A population that is too small will face two fearsome genetic enemies: inbreeding and genetic drift. Inbreeding increases the likelihood of recessive genetic diseases, weakening the health and fertility of subsequent generations. Genetic drift, on the other hand, randomly reduces the diversity of the gene pool. Over time, crucial gene variants that could help adapt to unexpected changes might disappear entirely. So what's the magic number? Conservation biologists often use the 50-500 rule. At least 50 individuals are needed to avoid short-term inbreeding depression, and 500 are needed to maintain long-term genetic diversity. But for humans on a journey lasting thousands of years, the actual number could be in the tens of thousands. We need a founding population large enough to ensure a healthy gene pool for the distant future. This is not an ark, it must be a mobile city from the very start. And then we face what is perhaps the greatest challenge of all: society. Imagine being born on the ship. Your sky is a metal dome. Your homeland is an artificial world. You are taught about a place called Earth, with its blue oceans and vast skies, but these are just stories, images in an archive. The purpose of your life and your children's lives is to continue a journey decided by your ancestors towards a planet you will never set foot on. How do you maintain purpose and willpower over dozens of generations? The 5th, 10th, or 20th generation might ask, why must we continue? This is our life. Why should we sacrifice it for someone else's dream? The risk of social collapse, civil war, the rise of extremist ideologies, or simply the loss of core technical knowledge is immense. How do you ensure that a 15th generation engineer still knows how to repair the fusion reactor built by their ancestors hundreds of years ago? The social structure, education system, and philosophy of life on a generation ship would have to be entirely different from anything we have ever known. Perhaps it is because of these seemingly insurmountable challenges that scientists have explored alternatives. One of them is the sleeper ship. Instead of multiple generations, the original crew would be placed in a state of hibernation or suspended animation, only to be awakened when the ship nears its destination. This solves the social and genetic problems, but poses enormous biological challenges regarding how to safely freeze and reanimate a human body, especially the complex brain. An even more radical idea is the embryo ship. Instead of sending adults, we would send a craft containing thousands of frozen human embryos, along with sperm and egg banks. The entire ship would be operated by advanced artificial intelligence. Upon arrival, the AI would incubate the embryos and raise the first generation of settlers with the knowledge and culture of Earth. This solution is lighter and more efficient, but it also raises profound philosophical questions about whether humans raised by machines would truly be human in the way we understand it. Whether it's a generation ship, a sleeper ship, or an embryo ship, each path to the stars is a monumental gamble. They are not just technical challenges, but also profound questions about our own nature, who we are, what we are willing to sacrifice, and what legacy we want to leave for generations who will never know a summer rain or the feeling of grass beneath their feet. If humans succeed in living and reproducing long-term in space, are we initiating a new branch of evolution, creating a different kind of human, Homo Caelestis? This question no longer belongs to science fiction, but delves deep into the fundamental principles of biology. Evolution never stopped. It is a continuous flow, and by moving to a completely new environment, we are placing ourselves in a new evolutionary crucible. The answer, though complex, increasingly points to an astonishing possibility. Yes, we may be on the threshold of creating Homo Caelestis, the celestial human. The primary driver for this change comes from selective pressures entirely different from those on Earth. For millions of years, our bodies have been fine-tuned for a constant gravitational pull, a dense atmosphere, and a protective magnetic field. In space, all those rules are broken. The two harshest factors will become the two main sculptors of the future human species, radiation and gravity. Constant cosmic radiation is an extremely potent mutagen. Over time, individuals with slightly more efficient natural DNA repair mechanisms or a better ability to produce protective pigments will have a survival and reproductive advantage. Over many generations, these traits could become widespread, creating a human lineage with innate radiation resistance that Earth-bound humans lack. In parallel is the low-gravity environment. On Mars with 1/3 of Earth's gravity, or on the Moon with 1/6, a tall, slender body becomes more efficient. The heart won't need to pump blood as forcefully against the pull of gravity. The vestibular system, which helps us maintain balance, will be completely recalibrated. The bodies that adapt most effectively to this state, avoiding severe bone loss and muscle atrophy, will be the healthiest and most likely to pass on their genes. This is natural selection happening right before our eyes. Initially, these are just temporary adaptations. An astronaut returns to Earth, and their body gradually, albeit with difficulty, readjusts. But what about a child born and raised on Mars? Their entire development, from fetus to adult, occurs in a low-gravity environment. Their skeleton will never achieve the density of an Earth human's. Their cardiovascular system will be fundamentally different. Their height could be significantly greater. After many generations, these changes will no longer be adaptations. They will become the new normal, a new biological baseline. A 10th-generation Martian might not be able to survive a return to Earth. The gravity of their home planet would become an unbearable burden, potentially crushing their fragile skeleton and causing acute heart failure. At that point, are we still one species? By biological definition, different species cannot interbreed and produce fertile offspring. Perhaps Martians and Earthlings still could, but the practical barriers would be enormous. A Martian woman might not be physically able to carry a pregnancy to term in Earth's 1G environment. And why wait thousands of years for natural selection? Humans might decide to take the wheel of evolution themselves. This is the concept of directed evolution. Using gene editing tools like CRISPR, we could accelerate the adaptation process by centuries. Imagine creating future colonists with genes optimized for maintaining bone density in space, superior radiation resistance, perhaps by borrowing genes from extremophiles like the tardigrade, or more efficient oxygen processing in a thin atmosphere. This, of course, opens up incredibly complex ethical questions. Are we still human in the natural sense? Who has the right to decide which traits should be enhanced? Would this create a genetic caste system, a distinction between the naturals and the engineered? But in the face of survival in a hostile environment, this might not be a choice but a necessity. The separation will not just be biological, it will be deeply ingrained in culture and psychology. Imagine a society that has never known rain, never seen a blue sky, or a vast ocean. Their myths, art, and language would be entirely different. They would be space people in the truest sense. How would they view Earth? As a sacred origin to be protected? Or as a crushing hell planet, teeming with pathogens? And conversely, how would we see them? As our distant children, or as a strange form of life? The potential for conflict, misunderstanding, or even a sense of superiority on either side is immense. We would need an entirely new legal and philosophical framework, an interplanetary law, to define the relationship between the different branches of humanity. But perhaps this branching out is the ultimate destiny of any intelligent species that survives long enough to master space travel. Life on Earth diversified to fill every ecological niche, from the deepest ocean trenches to the highest mountain peaks. Why should humanity be any different on a cosmic scale? Our future may not be a single human species, but a family of them. Homo sapiens on Earth, Homo martis on Mars, Homo titanus living on the moons of Saturn. Each perfectly adapted to its own world. This diversification, ultimately, is the ultimate insurance policy for the survival of consciousness. A catastrophe on one planet would not completely wipe out humanity. It is the highest expression of the drive to survive and explore, ensuring that the flame of human consciousness continues to burn, even if scattered among the stars. The journey into space doesn't just change where we live, it fundamentally changes who we are. So, from animal experiments to bold plans for generation ships, what does the roadmap to making reproduction in space a reality actually look like? The answer isn't a single breakthrough invention, but a multi-stage roadmap, a grand journey that we have only just begun. The journey we've explored together in this video, from the spinning mice in orbit, the ambitious plans for the Moon and Mars, to the vision of millennial starships, all point in one direction. Humanity is on the threshold of a great evolutionary leap. This is no longer science fiction, but a plan being drafted. That roadmap begins right here, in Earth's orbit. The first and perhaps most crucial necessary step in the next decade is to build and operate a space station equipped with an artificial gravity module. Imagine a section of the International Space Station or a commercial station like Starlab having a sufficiently large centrifugal ring. This would be the ultimate biological laboratory. Here, we could conduct long-term, controlled studies on mammalian reproduction, from conception, pregnancy, to birth and postnatal development, under various gravity levels, from Martian gravity, lunar gravity, to Earth's 1G. Only when we fully understand the impact of each gravity level and find the safety threshold can we confidently move forward. In parallel, experiments on advanced radiation shielding must also be prioritized. The second step on this roadmap is the Moon. The Artemis base that NASA and its partners are planning is not just a place to plant flags and collect rock samples. It must be designed from the outset as a biological outpost, a nursery for off-world life. With its proximity only a few days' travel away, the Moon is the ideal place to test medical procedures, closed-loop life support systems, and, most importantly, to observe the development of the first generation of mammals born and raised in a 1/6 gravity environment. The lessons from the Moon will be invaluable, determining whether we are ready for the giant leap to Mars. Only after mastering the technology and procedures on the Moon can we think about the third step, building a self-sustaining colony on Mars. This is an endeavor on a completely different scale. It requires not just technology, but a social and genetic plan. We will need a founding population large enough to ensure genetic diversity, and a society resilient to isolation and extreme psychological challenges. The first child born on Mars will not just be a scientific milestone, but the beginning of a new branch of humanity. The most important thing to realize is that this is not a space race for one nation or one company. This is a project for all of humanity, a multi-generational endeavor. Much like the builders of the great medieval cathedrals, they began their work knowing they would never see it completed. Our generation's task is to lay the foundation stones, build the orbital station, return to the Moon sustainably. Our children will build the first domes on Mars. And perhaps our grandchildren's children will be the ones to begin the journey to the stars. It demands patience, long-term vision, and an unprecedented level of international cooperation. Ultimately, the journey to solve the puzzle of reproduction in space forces us to confront the deepest questions about ourselves. As we try to replicate the conditions for life in a foreign place, we are forced to understand more than ever the fragility, preciousness, and complexity of life on Earth. It is not just a technical challenge, but a philosophical exploration. The quest to survive and thrive in the vast cosmos is also how we search for and affirm our place within it. The dream of the children of the stars is not about escaping Earth, but about carrying Earth's legacy, the legacy of life, to sow its seeds throughout the universe. And that, perhaps, is the ultimate destiny of an intelligent species.